So there's a there's a pattern that I've noticed. Um, First of all, I noticed in myself over the years, and I definitely noticed it in people who have come through NLP class. And um, it's a pattern that I think can really get in the way of learning and and jumping in wholeheartedly and trying things out. And it goes something like this. Like I'll find out about a technique, or something like meditation. Like somebody will say like, oh, meditation is really useful, and immediately you're like, the question comes up like, well, this will this work if we're under nuclear attack and you're stressed at work and your family's yelling at you? Will meditation work then? And so the tendency is to immediately think of the hardest situation. And and, and for me, what I've realized is, nothing works everywhere. And instead of thinking about the worst scenario where something won't work, beginning to get curious about, well, where can this work, and work in what way, and what will it do, instead of trying to figure out, intellectually, well, will this work in this worst case scenario? You know, I'll be teaching some communication thing, and somebody will say, well, will this work when I'm in a heated argument with my partner? Or will this work when I'm, about to get fired on my job? And and my answer is, probably not, or maybe. But what I do know is, that that's probably not the place to first practice any of these things. That instead of thinking like, will this work in the most extreme circumstance, begin to think, well, where can I explore this now? Um, it's very much like, if you were going to learn a martial art, you wouldn't jump into the ring with Mike Tyson on your first day, and of course it wouldn't. Any technique wouldn't work there. Um, and yet, if you ask the question, where will this work, and what does it do, and what does work mean? Like, how do I know if it's working? Um, that invites you to jump in and really find in your own experience what something can do. And I think there are many things that I kind of discarded. I thought, no, that wouldn't work, that, or I don't believe that, only to find out years later, like, oh, you know what, this actually really does work, and it works in a lot of places. And like I said, nothing works everywhere, especially in isolation. There's no silver bullet, so to speak. Um, but the fact that there's no silver bullet doesn't mean that something isn't tremendously useful in many, many, many situations, many contexts. So I always get amused when I catch myself doing that. Well, will this work here? Or when I hear a student say that. And I was having a conversation with Stephen Leeds from the NLP Center, and I mentioned that, somebody said, oh, Rob, you're still stressed after all these years of meditating. And Steve said, well, maybe you should wonder how stressed you would be if you hadn't meditated all those years. And I thought that's a really good point. Things work as much as they work. And I think that's a really useful question, is, where can this work, and work in what way, and what does it do? How does this behave in the world? It's kind of like when I'm trying out something new in cooking, instead of thinking what's the right place to put this ingredient or spice, to really get curious, like, how does this work? How does it combine with other things? What's the best way to cook it? then you're actually on the playing field, and you're learning, and you're doing experiments, and you're growing, and you're expanding your range of vocabulary of what you can do in the world. So definitely, I encourage you to to have a little alarm go off the next time you hear yourself saying like, "Will this work here?" Um, and I understand the spirit of that question. I think when I've asked it, when I got a new tool, I immediately think like, "Oh, this is great! I'm going to be able to go anywhere, and this is going to solve everything." I think that's the question is really coming from, will it work everywhere, and are all my problems solved forever? And I understand that, and I really can respect that. But at the same time, I think asking the question of where can this work in the long run is much more useful, because it gets you actually experimenting in your own experience, and learning, um, uh, rather than relying on somebody else's experience in that realm. So I hope you find that useful, and find out all the places where it can't work and where it can work.